Hold up a minute. Is it possible that Klipsch already designed and built the ultimate soundbar, but no one noticed? While Klipsch has been pushing their new line of powered cinema soundbars for the past 2 years, the Heritage Theater Bar has been a part of their product portfolio for nearly as long, and yet no one really talks about it. The Heritage Theater Bar is a passive soundbar, meaning it's essentially a left, center, and right loudspeaker in a single chassis that requires you to use either a separate multi-channel amplifier or AV receiver for power. While this may seem counterintuitive, it's actually somewhat inspired, especially for those of you who complain that soundbars become outdated with time. Now, Klipsch didn't invent the passive soundbar. Lots of companies make them. But this one is unique in that it's built right alongside Klipsch's heritage products like the mighty La Scala. The Theater Bar's speakers each have a 3/4 inch titanium tweeter resting inside a Tractrix horn, not to mention dual 4-inch woofers which combine to give the bar a reported frequency response of 95 Hz to 20 kHz, meaning that a subwoofer is most definitely required for full range playback. Sensitivity is rated at 92 dB with an impedance of 8 ohms, making the bar fairly amplifier and receiver friendly. It's clearly intended to be wall mounted as it has a fairly hefty mounting cleat pre-installed from the factory and can sit completely flush with your wall. The binding posts are actually located inside the speaker itself and are accessible by removing the magnetic grill. They are a modern push-pin design that can accept bare wire, though 12-gauge wire may prove more tricky than say 14 or 16-gauge cable. Now, for those of you who prefer not to mount the soundbar, the Klipsch also works placed atop a cabinet. We used our tried and true washing machine pucks to cut down on unwanted vibrations before realizing that the bar came with its own sticky feet, so be sure to install those first. Once in place, setup is very straightforward. You connect it to your amp or receiver the same way you would any traditional left, center, and right speaker. We use 2 different receivers, the Onkyo RZ50 as well as the Onkyo 7100, both of which prove to be great matches, especially after running Dirac. For the rest of our setup, I opted to go with a more simplistic 3.1 setup opposed to a full 5.1 or 5.1.2 Atmos rig. Of course, you can expand the Theater Bar to be part of a full surround sound setup by adding 2 or 4 RP400M bookshelf speakers, or you could go with Klipsch in-walls or in-ceiling speakers for both surrounds and Atmos channels. You'll want to budget for a subwoofer though in order to round out the Theater Bar's performance. We used the Klipsch SPL100, which mated very well. The soundbar itself is large enough that it doesn't look out of place below even an 85-inch TV like our Sony X95J. Now, once everything was connected, I ran the Theater Bar through a full Dirac calibration inside both of our Onkyo receivers. Dirac elevates the performance of the Theater Bar considerably, as I'm sure Odyssey, Waipow, or the like would do as well. I just didn't have those options available to me during this review. Without Dirac, the Theater Bar sounds very much how you would expect a trio of Klipsch bookshelf speakers resting in rather close proximity to each other to sound. Dynamic, engaging, lively, but not altogether spacious nor full range. The bar with no correction applied or virtualization turned on doesn't sound bad, it just doesn't sound as cinematic or spacious. Post-Dirac calibration, watching movies like Ghostbusters Afterlife or shows like Peacemaker on HBO Max, this bar starts to sing a much different tune. Let's start with the bar's strengths first. The sheer scale here is epic. While I won't go so far as to say the Theater Bar sounds exactly like Klipsch's other heritage speakers, when watching movies at least, it's surprisingly close to our fortes and heresies that I would be fine living with it over potentially spending more for other heritage speakers. Now, music listening is a little bit different. It's good, absolutely fine for casual or background listening, but for critical listening of a stereo signal, the same separation and spaciousness isn't always present, and you no doubt will get better results again when listening in stereo by going with more traditional Klipsch speakers. If you're not a 2-channel purist, putting your receiver into Dolby Surround, or better yet, Dolby Atmos, will open up the bar when listening to stereo tracks, getting you closer to a more traditional stereo sound. But getting back to movies, the Theater Bar's sound is absolutely captivating. Dynamics and scale are not an issue, as it routinely transformed the whole of our front wall into one giant soundscape. Now, that isn't to say that the Klipsch is just a sledgehammer, just throwing sound around at you with reckless abandon. The nuance and detail throughout is just impressive, and sounds do begin to wrap around you when using Dolby virtualization. Dialogue intelligibility is also very good. Dialogue does not sound the least bit constrained, either in terms of scale or presence, and the Klipsch has ample articulation on its own without the need for adding dialogue enhancements or settings. The mid-range performance on the whole isn't warm or lush, but rather neutral to perhaps just a hair lean, with that mild rise as you near the crossover point with the tweeter. This means you don't have to worry about missing a note or a phrase with the Klipsch. Though, if you like a bit of added body or warmth to your mid-range, this may not be the bar for you. With respect to the highs, performance is very much going to be content dependent. The tweeters on their own can extend all the way up to the limit of human hearing without distortion or without sounding aggressive or overly forward. That said, when presented with a poor signal or when faced with heavy compression, the tweeters are not, I repeat, not the most forgiving. So if there is a flaw, you're going to hear it. Well-recorded tracks and film mixes sound absolutely sublime, but compressed signals like YouTube videos and some TV broadcasts can result in highs that are sibilant and even grainy. I found turning the treble down a notch or two on my receiver pretty much solved this issue. Now, the reason I haven't talked about bass is because the theater bar doesn't really have any. While it's not difficult to cross this bar over with a sub is absolutely necessary, as the bar has no appreciable bass below about 70 hertz or so. So when listening without a sub, you would be forgiven if you felt the theater bar was lean sounding, because it is. But unlike other soundbars, for example, the recently reviewed LG Eclair, the Heritage Bar has enough low mid-bass on its own that deeper voices like mine don't also come out of the sub when set up correctly, which is a plus. But if you're curious how the bar fares without a sub, or whether or not you should consider using the bar without one, don't, because its bass is largely non-existent. And this lack of bass really is the biggest downside. Now, whether or not you like its overall sound or tone is going to come down to personal taste. I loved watching movies through this setup, and while the Klipsch bar may not be powered or full of whiz-bang features, the sound, once dialed in, was insanely enjoyable and made watching movies a very fun experience. Now, as for comparisons, the question I most wanted answered was, would this be a better solution and potentially a greater value compared to the Sennheiser AMBEO? I am split right down the middle on this one. No, the Klipsch is not a greater value, as it costs more on its own than the AMBEO. Never mind the fact that the AMBEO is an all-inclusive unit, complete with ATMOS and DTS-X support, as well as a built-in subwoofer. That said, should a new format beyond ATMOS or DTS-X come to market, it's not likely the AMBEO would support it, whereas the Klipsch could. In this respect, the Klipsch makes more sense long term. It's really no different from buying discrete passive speakers, but soundbar versus soundbar, the AMBEO is more impressive all by itself and has far more balanced sound on its own compared to the Klipsch. So, would I buy the AMBEO in 2022 over the Klipsch? Yes, I would, but with an asterisk. Sennheiser hasn't exactly been forthright with respect to their future plans as it relates to the AMBEO platform since the company's sale last year. While they have stated that there are no plans to abandon the AMBEO, the fact that it hasn't received any real updates in the past 12 months leaves me wondering if plans have changed. What about Klipsch's own Cinema 1200 system? For me, I would buy the theater bar over any of Klipsch's newer cinema bars, save for maybe the 600. The Cinema 600 still rocks, and its value is it's hard to beat. The 600 aside, though, the Heritage Bar sounds far better than the 1200. Plus, its reliance on an AV receiver of your choosing means you're bound to have greater control, adjustability, and customization over its sound than what Klipsch allows through their still very quirky app. You're going to spend more with the Heritage Bar, that's no secret, but long term, I feel it may be the better overall investment over the 1200. And as for other bars, it really comes down to whether or not you're okay with a passive solution or something all-inclusive. If you're looking for simplicity and fewer components, go with a more traditional soundbar. The Klipsch Cinema 600 if you're on a budget, the Sonos Beam Gen 2 for a one-bar-fits-all solution for under $1,000, and of course the Samsung Q950 for those who want a full theater experience but made easy. But if you're piecing together a traditional home theater and want to save space, the Heritage Theater Bar is totally worth a look. I have to to admit, I am surprised more people have not talked about this product because it's pretty damn great. Yes, it's expensive and big and requires both a sub and a receiver with room correction to sound its level best. But once you take all of that into account, it's a pretty great speaker package for changing one's living space into a theater without too much fuss or clutter. It's not perfect, but definitely worth a look, especially if you are trying to get that true theater sound in your home. So that's it. That is now my review of the Klipsch Heritage Theater Bar, but now it's time to find out if KRISTI liked it.
Oh, I was very impressed with the soundbar.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds really, really close to having a more traditional 2 or 3 channel setup.
Okay.
I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Klipsch Heritage products. You know, they're just on another level. But I hate to do this to you again.
Oh, no.
But I think, yeah, I know. It'll be okay.
Okay.
Just bear with me. We differ just slightly in our feelings about the bar.
Okay.
But like the Sonos Beam, ultimately we do agree in the end. So
what do we disagree on?
No, I mean, I think it's, look, just listen.
All right.
Okay. So I know that you weren't all that impressed with the sound right out of the box. And I actually thought it sounded pretty good. I mean, it was way better out of the box than like the Sonos Beam. But I agree that once Dirac was applied, yes, it did improve. I just thought on its own, like in its stock setting, that it was a pretty good, solid sound.
Oh, it's solid. I'm not going to lie. It's solid. If you want to know what the theater bar sounds like straight out of the box, if you currently already own, say, RP400M bookshelf speakers or a Klipsch bookshelf with a 4 or 5 inch driver, just put those 2 speakers about 3.5 feet apart and then play your favorite music or watch a movie. That's what the theater bar sounds like without Dirac or Odyssey or some type of room correction applied, and in stereo. If you go into a Dolby Surround or a Dolby Matrix type format or DTS, whatever your flavor is, and you apply room correction, the sound of the bar just opens up considerably. And it very much sounds like you took your 2 speakers that were 3 feet apart and you move them now 6, 7 feet apart. So you start to get real appreciable imaging. And that is one of the things that is rather great about the bar, is that it has that capability because of its mass and its relative size. Is it does extend when treated properly.
I just didn't feel like the adjustment was as big as it was like with the Sonos Beam. You know, I thought there were improvements. I just didn't think that straight out of the box, like if somebody were to not run any of the room correction, I don't think they're going to be disappointed.
No,
that's just my point. But anyway, moving on. As for the bass without a subwoofer, now, again, I just didn't think it was all that bad. And maybe it's because it has a really ample mid-bass section like you talked about, but I certainly wouldn't have said that it had none. So that's somewhere where we disagree. But yes, I will agree with you that adding a sub really does flesh out everything and makes it sound more balanced. So yes, ultimately I say add the sub for the best sound. I just disagreed with you when you said that it didn't have any. To me, the most impressive trait of the soundbar was its intelligibility. Yeah. So as far as understanding dialogue, this has been, in my opinion, the best solution I think we've ever had in the house. So if you...
Wait, I'm sorry. Best solution we've had in the house among soundbars? Are you saying like this is the...
Anything.
This is the best speaker for intelligibility you think we've had in the house?
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
If you struggle like I do to understand dialogue when you're like watching movies or TV shows or whatever, I think this is going to be a really great, if not among the best solutions. I did not have the troubles I typically do when we're watching stuff, especially like more current programming where everybody seems to mumble through their whole freaking scene. You know, God forbid anybody speak, articulately or enunciate their words. But I thought this was really good at combating that issue for me.
I agree with you. I was pleasantly surprised. This is one of the few soundbars where While the Onkios have a dialogue enhancement, they have the ability to turn dialogue up and down. We didn't need it. In fact, engaging it just for testing purposes actually made the sound a little bit more unnatural than natural. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I still think that for me, in an hour space and for my taste, I preferred the treble -1 rather than at ruler flat. I just thought that took a little bit of edge off of compressed signals and elevated the bar for me. I don't think you really noticed too much when I did that. So the intelligibility is still really high, even if you take the treble down a notch or two. So that best intelligibility speaker so far.
Yeah,
wow.
I really feel that way. Lastly, I think this is the closest bar we've ever had that comes to besting the AMBEO.
I think in terms of scale and presence, I wholeheartedly agree. The AMBEO does do a better job when watching the exact same content at the exact same volumes, does a better job surrounding you. But it should. It has upward firing drivers. It uses beam steering. It has DSP. It has all of the tricks that trick your brain into thinking that it's hearing things where no speaker exists. The Klipsch manages to almost, with Dirac and Dolby virtualization, almost manages to come 180 degrees. Up into your listening position, which is rather impressive. And for not having height channels, it has great vertical dispersion, which was really impressive.
Well, and also I think it sounds really, really close to, a traditional setup of discrete speakers. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's going to appeal to your more, dyed-in-the-wool audiophile.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is now our review of the Klipsch Heritage Theater Bar. What did you guys think? Let us know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, my question of the day for you is this. It's pretty simple. If you were to go with a soundbar, would you prefer a passive bar or a powered one? And why? Let's get the conversation going. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you used any of the links that KRISTI left for you down below, know that that is a great way that you guys have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here, and we both thank you all very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is officially it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.